The 1935 Mannin Moar by Johannes Lacroix. Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Grand Prix 80th Anniversary. Today we're going to do something a bit different. A race in Britain, the Mannin Moar. And here you can easily see the start of the Mannin Moar, image courtesy of Getty Images, and official program of the actual race If you are unfamiliar with this series, it is a series where I review Grand Prix races that happened exactly 80 years ago, to the day. Last week, we had some fun with the Alvis racetrack in Germany, one of the biggest races of the year. But today, we're here in the Isle of Man in Britain for a race that doesn't attract as much attention from the media. It's called the Mannin Moar. As a side note, that this race happened on a Friday for some reason, but the day I'm recording this, it's a Saturday because I'm a bit late. Not that bad. The Mannin Moar has been a minor race in the Isle of Man for the past 3 years, and so far Brian Lewis has won it twice. Can he do it a third time in a row on this track? Here's the entries. Brian Lewis, Charles Martin, and Lindsay Eccles is not a girl, were driving Bugatti Type 59 cars for this race. Their biggest competition would be Richard Shuttleworth in the famous Alfa Romeo Tipo, going against the old Type 59. Shuttleworth had the car that stood out from the others because every other Alfa in this race was the Monza model. Ironically, this was a race in Britain, but the amount of cars that weren't British in the entry list were all but 2. Only 2 British cars in an all-British race. Those 2 cars were the Works ERA cars. Oh, one more thing. Before we get to the race, there was a person on the entry list who didn't come to the race on race day, called Richard Seaman. He was a young driver who, in just 3 years, became an amazing driver with Mercedes-Benz. Just like Bernd Rossmeyer did with Auto Union. So now we are going to give the starting order for this race now. So row 1 is 3 cars. Charles Martin, Bugatti Type 59. Now none of the people starting on the grid order have the time. I don't have the time for any of them, so we're just going to keep it the way it is. It's probably drawn by Bollard anyway. And row 2 is... No. And then... outside of him is Dick Shuttleworth in the Tipo, and then Brian Lewis, everyone watching him, in the Type 59, just like Charles Martin. Row 2, we have 2 cars here. We have Louis Fonte in the Alfa Monza, and Lindsay Eccles. That shows that it isn't a girl. Bugatti Type 59. I think so. And in row 3, we have Tim Rose Richards, the Maserati 8-cylinder, Raymond Mays. And that's one of the all-British entries in the ERA A. And Charles Brackenbury in the Type 51, Bugatti Type 51. That's a variation of the Type 35. And then Teddy Racing. Row 4, we have Teddy Racing in the same car that Charles Brackenbury is driving, Bugatti Type 51. And Humphrey Cook in the second ERA car. Row 5, there are no pictures for any of these guys. There's Andrew Lythe in the Bugatti Type 35B, and then Anthony Hamilton and Dick Wilkins in Alfa Monza cars. And the final person is Austin Dobson in the Alfa Monza. At the start, Lewis and Shuttleworth had a great start, compared to Martin, going from 1st to 3rd. Louis Fonte and Charles Brackenbury were off to a poor start, allowing Raymond Mays to catch up. So that meant that he was off really well. After 10 laps, this is what it is. Dick Shuttleworth first. And then only 3 seconds behind him is Brian Lewis, in the person that everyone watches. And then there's Charles Martin, 11 seconds off of him in this exact same car. 11 seconds off of Dick Shuttleworth. And then 40 seconds off of Shuttleworth is Raymond Mays in his ERA car. 1/3 of the way through, Shuttleworth had a transmission problem, so he retired. Lindsay Eccles, who is not a woman, passed Raymond Mays in his ERA, so there were 3 Bugattis in the top 3. But this image is taken before that happens. But because of Shuttleworth's retirement, guess who's in the lead now? Lewis might win 3rd in a row. I sure could. And that's Raymond Mays. Bugatti were superior in the early 30s and late 20s, but now their superiority is being questioned. Raymond Mays in the British-engineered ERA is having a classic duel for 3rd place against Eccles. The duel lasted on and on, but now, unfortunately, the British have to stop for extra fuel while the French press on. Gotta keep this brief. Just so you guys aren't confused, the course is on the right. The course is there. But that one pit stop wouldn't satisfy the condition of the ERA. Both Mays and Cook started to have problems with their cars and came in more frequently. You can see both of them in at the same time. Okay, getting by them. After 30 laps, Bugatti swept off the podium. This was the leaderboard. Brian Lewis was in the lead, and Charles Martin was about a minute behind. Didn't have as much skill. So, yeah. And Lindsay Eccles, about 3 minutes behind Brian. And then we have Louis Fonts, 4 minutes off of Brian Lewis. So, Louis Fonts in the Alpha. This non-British entry. Ooh, it's the Ferrari. There we go. A lap after lap 30, Lindsay Eccles was in the pits with a transmission problem. This allowed Mays to catch back up. 9 laps after that, he passed Fontes, putting him in 3rd. Yep, this is pretty much what it looks like. He's definitely on the way towards a really good racing. But unfortunately, with just 2 minutes left to go, Raymond Mays' ERA threw in the towel too. Just like Eccles, the problem was transmission. Come on. Yeah, come on. So, that brings us to the end of the race. But wait a minute. Who has won? Let's see. Yes, it's Brian Lewis in his Bugatti Type 59 with a time of 2 hours, 40 minutes, and 11 seconds. He has won it for the 3rd time in a row. Wow, I'm really lucky. So with that, here we have the remaining finishing order for the Mannin Moar. Brian Lewis won, obviously, but Charles Martin was 51 seconds off of him, indicating that Brian Lewis may have made a small mistake. And in 3rd was Louis Fonts, 8 minutes off. Well, that's like 4 laps down. And then, yeah, in 4th we have Teddy Raisin. It was 15 minutes off. That's maybe about 5 laps. And then Raymond Mays, unfortunately, he didn't finish because of a transmission problem. And Austin Dobson and Dick Wilkins were a lap down in 5th and 6th. Or 6th and 7th. And 7th or 8th is Charles Brackenbury, about a lap down. And then Lindsay Eccles, DNF with his universal joint problem. And then Humphrey Cook in the other ERA was leaking oil, had an oil pump problem, so he didn't make it. And just like the other major retirements, Dick Shuttleworth was not able to finish because of his mistake with the transmission. And then there was Anthony Hamilton and Andrew Lath, who crashed very early into the race, and then Tim Rose-Richards, who couldn't start it because he, just like the others, had a universal joint problem too. So, too bad for Tim Rose. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this quick project about something different than the big races in France, Italy, and Germany. If you did, leave a comment, click the like or subscribe button, and I'll see you on June 16th for the Eifelrennen at the Nürburgring. Here we go. This is a big test for the big manufacturers.